Welcome back to our creation of a live streaming program using the C programming language based off of ffmpeg and its libraries. We are moving on to the GUI interface. So let's take a look at what that entails. So let's take a look at our make file. So we have two different versions. We have this GUI, which just uses GUI.c, and we have this GUI2, which uses test GUI and GUI2.h. This GUI.c is a standalone program, and I will show it to you real quickly. And we have the selections. Right now we have video, X11 desktop, webcam, microscope, RCA capture, and HDMI capture. Gonna add some other features in the future, so we can either select it or we can end the stream. So let's take a look at that file. There's some things here that will eventually go away. So it does have header guard, because I was trying to make it into an independent header file, which is the other version. So I'm just leaving that there. We are including this GTK/GTK.h. That is the GTK graphical interface, which could be found here at docs.gtk.org, and we're using GTK3. So we're using multiple functions here, and to do that we need some global variables. We will find a way to avoid that in the other version, but for right now these are the global variables. I have just a skeleton of a function to write the configuration file or configuration variables, and that's blank for now. It's just printing out that which one was selected. This is selected, we will get to in just a moment, and the on select clicked and the on end clicked we'll get to in just a moment. So we'll go down to the bottom here. We have main, and main just calls this GUI start, which passes in argc and argv, and it doesn't have to be the argc and argv from main. It could just be a new integer and a new double pointer here, or a pointer to an array, or however you want to send it. But let's go take a look at that GUI start. So we have this GUI start. Like I said, it brings in a integer and a double pointer. Char double pointer specifically, and these are two of the same GTK widgets. These two can be local, and they are pointers as the ones above were, if I have not mentioned that. And the reason we need argc and argv is those need to get passed into this function GTK init, and we're not passing anything in there. So again, I could have just created essentially null variables to pass through there, but we'll just keep passing the ones from main. So once we initialize the library, essentially, we're going to take that window GTK widget, and we are going to use the GTK window new, and this is going to be a top level window. We may go with supplemental windows like the select an overlay or select a video later on. And it has a title, select video source. The audio source is going to be the microphone regardless right now, but that could always change. We are setting the size, which is 300 by 100, which is that horizontal bar basically. And some more initialization. We're creating this VBox, which is the overall box itself, and it's contained in the window pointer or data structure. So now we need to define the buttons that we're using. So the first one is that radio button, and we use the GTK radio button new with label, and for that it's going to be null, and the label is going to be video. And then all the other buttons are the GTK radio button new with label from widget. It's going to be associated with that video button. So this allows us to have it to be a radio button, so you can only select one. And then we go through the rest of them, which is the X11 desktop, the webcam, microscope, RCA, and HDMI. And again, more initialization for each of the buttons than we have, or each of the radio buttons. And then each of the actual buttons, we have the on select, which is just labeled as select as you saw before. And this is the select button. And then we have the end button, which just is labeled as end screen. And we'll show that in a moment. Now, when each of those buttons are pressed, when they are clicked, so when select button is clicked, it will run this function on select clicked, sending the window data to the function. And likewise on the end button, it will send the window button selection. Now that basically all this is to set up the windowing environment. Then we want to show it all, and we basically are starting a loop. This is going to stay in that loop until something which is in the end button triggers it to end, returns a 0, which I'm not pulling any information, but we could always add error codes. So let's go look at that. We'll look at the on end function first. On end click. So the way these functions get passed, or the way the arguments get passed, it takes in 2 arguments. In this case, we are only using 1. I just added this option right there, this GTK button widget, just to avoid compiler errors. That's all that's doing, is avoiding a compiler error. This line can be removed or commented out without any problems. We'll take a look at that in a moment. And then it runs this GTK widget destroy, which destroys the window. It quits the window, and we're writing a 0, which is our standard end stream number, which I'll show in a moment. And it's a void, so it just returns. On any of the options is selected and the select button is selected. Again, it's doing this GTK button widget just to use the variable, and using this G string dupe to do the same thing, because they're 2 different data types. Then it runs the select, or it creates this variable select input and takes the value returned from is selected and writes sends to write comp that selection. So what is this is selected function? Sorry about that. This could probably be written a little better, and I think it may be written a little better in the next version. So we define this is selected because that's what's being returned. And we have the G Boolean, which is a Boolean used within the GTK library for each of the values. And the value of each of those Booleans is taken from its corresponding button. The video button, the X11 button, the webcam, microscope, RCA or HDMI. And then it's running it through a series of ifs and else ifs. It's giving its selection. This is based off of our script series, so this could always be changed later on. It's printing out each of the selected items through the webcam, through the RCA, through HDMI, and then it's returning the selected input. So that's the standalone program, like I said, which we showed right here. And if you select RCA and hit selected, it says you selected RCA. If you selected HDMI and hit end, it just says selected 0 and it ends. Now let's take a look at that second version. So I'm using this test GUI.c, which all it's doing is including this GUI2.h and running this GUI start like the main function before. But we had to make some changes to it, or more specifically, we had to make changes to this GUI2.h. Again, using the same library, the same header guards, the same include here for GTK.h. Now over here we are defining our own data structure. We're calling it a GUI data structure, and it's including all these GTK widget pointers for each of the items and for the window. The write comp is the same, and we'll get back to the is selected, on clicked, and end stream. So we're going to go start here with the GUI start. Again, our C and our V are passed through. Those go to the GTK init function. And then we are defining our GUI data structure as GUI underscore data. We're defining our VBox, our select button, and our end button. And then we're initializing that top level, same thing with a title and the size. It's going to be the same box, we'll show in a moment. Set that VBox, it's a container, it goes to the container GUI window. Then we create the video buttons in the same manner as we did before. This time we're using the element of GUI data. Now, GUI data itself is not a pointer, so we are using the dot operator and not the arrow operator, even though each of the individual elements are pointers. And this is, again, similar to the other version. Again, we're using it as part of that data structure. We are starting that vertical box with each of these buttons, each of these radio buttons, and then we are creating the select button and the end button. Again, slightly different, but basically the same as these are exactly the same as we did before. And then we, over here, instead of passing the window data, with passing the GUI data pointer. And we're showing all with this GUI data.window and running GTK main and then returning. As we did before, let's take a look at that end. Just doing something to use that button data because we're not using it anyplace else. We are using the user data and we're passing that to destroy. And then we are quitting and writing that 0. And on the on select clicked, we're taking in that GUI data from the arguments. We're not doing anything with the button, so we're just doing something to avoid compiler errors or compiler warnings. They're not errors, so it can be removed. And then we'll run is selected, and we are actually passing the GUI data to the is selected. We'll take a look at that up here. So we're initializing that select input to 0, just to have it set to 0. And then we are using this if toggle button get active function for each of the items or each of the members of this GUI data. And this time GUI data is a pointer, so we are using the arrow operator. And we are going from video through X11 all the way down to HDMI selected. The error case in this case that if nothing gets selected, it will send a 0 and terminate. So that is the GUI 2, and we'll take a look at that. And it functions externally exactly the same. You select something, you end it. But this one, what this allows me to do is to take this GUI 2 and over here where we have this test main, which will be once we have a name for this. And if you have any selections, go ahead and add that as a comment on what we should be naming this program. I'll probably put a poll out also eventually. In this test main is over here where I said add a P thread. I can add this GUI function as its own thread to be running alongside the RTMP functionality, which if you've taken a look, I've been doing some tests with that. And if you look here, for every public live stream I've done, I've probably done 1 or 2 dozen ones that I've made private, just testing. Some of these have failed after a second. Some of them have gone on for about an hour. I've had inconsistent results. Once I get some of that figured out, or I'll show some of the debugging that I've done in a future video. But the next video will be going ahead and adding in this GUI interface and merging it in and seeing how well that works. And thank you for watching this video. Take a look at the playlist of how we've gone so far with this project if you haven't noticed it, or if you want to take a look at the ffmpeg script series to see where we are coming from. Go ahead and click those, which should be on your screen now, and you have a great day.